To go?
Perfect.
Okay.
Over to you, Glenn.
Okay, thanks for that, guys. Sorry about the little interruptions. I'm not overly tech savvy and probably at this time of the morning not either. So firstly, I'd like to thank Andrew and Aidan and that for making it possible to do the presentation. I'm a great believer in doing presentations to cover everything around strength and conditioning. So for me, I look at it and go, there's lots of things out there on how to train, what to measure, exercises and drills. But sometimes I think there's a little bit of a lag in how do people actually set up their sessions, whether they be in the gym, the court or the field. So I wanted to do this more around actually how we go about delivering the session, whatever type it is, as opposed to the session content. So in a few ways, the presentation will be a little bit dry. It's probably not as exciting as some, but I think there's a lot of coaches out there that we all have our own ways of presenting. Some of us have done a lot, some of us haven't. There's no rights and wrong ways with it, but sometimes it's just good to be able to get opportunities to talk with other coaches about how you look at doing it and also how it works out for young coaches coming through to try and give them the heads up on what they can do as well. So a little bit about me. I have as Aidan said, managed the Bond High Performance Training Centre here on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. So I have my Masters of Exercise Science, Bachelor of Exercise Science, my Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist and Registered Strength and Conditioning Coaching status with the NSCA, and a Level 3 Master Coach with the ASCA in Australia. I'm pretty passionate about furthering my knowledge. No matter how old you get, I think you've got to keep on pushing to get that information out there to as many people as possible. I'm continually trying to improve myself and get ideas from as many people as possible, and as a group to try and move forward. So as an industry, we can get the respect that I believe we deserve. We're an educated group of people that are critical in improving athlete performance and team performance, but sometimes the recognition's not there as high as some of the others. And I think that all comes down to how we go about delivering things, how we set up, and the professional approach to how we go about things. Having worked with many elite teams myself and individual athletes, I coached to 2 World Cups, the Australian Wallaroos rugby side. I've got individual athletes that are with swimming, MMA, that have gone to different places, World Cups and that sort of thing as well. So I've had a reasonable amount of experience in doing it. I don't profess to know everything, but the idea is about sharing ideas and hoping people can get little takeaways from the things that we do as well. The unique side of working here at the High Performance Centre, we not only look after the strength and conditioning for our tier 1 sports and work with intern athletes and that, we have many elite teams worldwide come through our centre. When they come to the Gold Coast for doing camps, we've had teams from the UK, America, like New Zealand, Argentina, particularly around the rugby, rowing, netball type space as well. And we've had about 35 to 40 international teams come through here. And one of the interesting things for me is when those teams come in, obviously they have their own S&C coaches. So it's a really good opportunity to observe some of the best people in the world with the best teams in the world, also setting up and designing and contributing and running their program. It's quite unique to get to see that in a situation where we are here. So I'm hoping that we can impart a little bit of that knowledge as well. One thing that I found really interesting there is it gives you unique insight into how the coaches react with their teams, how they build respect and get results. And there are many different styles on how S&C coaches are, how the main coaches are, and how they interact. So I think that's pretty important for us all to understand. And as an S&C coach, we need to be able to adjust to work successfully with coaches of all different personality types. So in your careers, you've probably all had opportunities where we've had coaches that are quite abrupt, coaches are more quieter and just deal with players in a very controlled manner. Loud coaches, domineering. It's not saying any of those are right or wrong. You can see different coaching styles like that and they still get the results. So it's a matter of, as a strength and conditioning coach, how we're able to work and communicate to achieve results with the parties involved to get what we want and get a professional outcome for our team and for the athletes in our team to get the results that are required. A little bit about Bond University campus here. To put it in perspective for everyone, we're a small university on the Gold Coast. We only have 6,000 students, so we're very small compared to the major universities here in Australia that'll have 50 or 60,000 students. And we're the only private university in Australia. So it's completely private, not-for-profit, but beautiful campus, and everything gets put back into the facilities and that here as well. We focus on academic excellence as well, but Bond University has a huge branding around sport. It's a major player for us, and one of the reasons why the High Performance Centre here is a High Performance Centre is to attract those teams and give our students doing physio, exercise and sports science the opportunity to see and be able to interact with those teams at elite levels to give them a unique experience, which is achievable for us because we're only a small university. As opposed to those other universities as well, we don't focus on, at Uni Games, we compete in all the sports here. So we train the athletes for those, but we have 5 tier 1 sports that we really focus on, and that's how we align into our high performance sport here. So we have rugby union. We play in the Queensland Premier League, which is a feeder into Super Rugby. Men's and women's, we have an Aon Sevens women's program, of which we're current national champions. The Gold Coast, the Commonwealth Games just there in last few weeks in the Commonwealth Games gold medal squad for the Australian women's side had 3 of our players in that squad, which was Maddie and Tegan Levi and Charlotte Caslick. We have big input into AFLW and AFL and AFLW here in Australia, which in the UK mightn't really hit too much with you guys on what that is, but it's a unique sport pretty much to Australia that's very well funded and very professional. We have teams in the Premier League there as well, and we had 6 swimmers compete at the Commonwealth Games. This year we picked up 2 goals for our squads here, and we also look after triathlon. So a little bit about the presentation as a whole is what we want to do is go through and look at the planning and key considerations when you're looking to set up your program. I think it's important to conceptualise your approach to your training plan right from the start. So you need to know clearly what your session is going to be and how you're going to achieve those objectives. Like to have a sequential flow from drill to drill. So if you're working with smaller teams or large teams, it's good to get into the habit of having a really good plan so you can get that sequential flow. So whether it's in the gym, the field or court time, there needs to be time spent to ensure that the easiest and most efficient way to complete those drills or exercises, and also on the field and court, how players and athletes move to the next station in that drill to optimise time. So that way we're not getting athletes walking back and through one drill to the next drill or walking past one drill and coming back. We want it to flow really concisely and in a really organised and professional manner. And if you have a big squad with multiple stations when you're working on field, where you might have 6 stations working at one time, it's important that the organisation of what you're doing there is really well done. We also, setting up the field, little things that I like to do is, I don't know whether it's always possible with how you schedule your own sessions, but I always like to have all the preparation, everything set up, whether it be on court or on field, before the players arrive. It's less stressful for you, and it gives a very professional look on what you're going to do with your program. And then we're going to have a talk about communication and feedback, the planning considerations and how you prioritise what you do, and communication, how everyone needs to be informed and understand what the process is going to be. And then we're going to look at reports, how we formalise, why we do this workout, how it worked, and the type of results we either achieved or we're trying to achieve within that workout. So the S&C coach must program the sessions based on the number of players, availability of space and equipment. When we're going, as I go through the presentations, a few points I'm going to go back to a number of times because I just think they're pretty important to work with. But with setting up the field, I'm pretty big on everything looking right. I am pretty OCD when it comes to how I line things up. I think it sets a professional standard on what you're trying to achieve as well. So, like I said, have this done prior to players arriving. I remember a time at Shoot Shield in Sydney with the rugby side. The first day I went to the training, I got to the field early, everything was set up, and when the first players arrived in, I remember them saying, "Oh my God, this is a bit different." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" And they said, "Oh, the S&C coach we had last year used to turn up and go, 'What does everyone feel like doing today?'" So these are the kind of things with this type of presentation is with our knowledge and skills, I really want to make it clear that we have to be professional in all aspects which comes to arriving on time and setting up. So when you do your setup for your drills, you've got to look at the layout and make sure it's a workable space and the space you've been allocated will allow you to do what you had planned. It needs to be aligned and look well presented. I think that says a lot about you and your expectations and professionalism. As you can see in the photos there, the bags are aligned and square, the cones are set up square, the bags are lined up on the line. That's just a me thing, but I do think it helps with the professionalism when you go to sessions and you see things just thrown around and dumped in different places. The S&C coach delivering might have a really good plan on what he's going to do, but it's that perception when players and coaches walk in that I think is pretty critical as well. Some of the things you need to look at is you need to check with your coaches prior to the session the area that you require, and if that needs to be compromised because it doesn't work in with some of the plans that they might be doing on the evening, it's easier to know and adjust that before you get started and before you start setting up your drills. I think we probably have all had experiences where as an S&C coach, we tend to be the early arriver at the sessions without doubt, and have our plan set up on a half field or full field, whatever has been agreed with the coach or the coaching staff at that stage. And then when you arrive, you'll get a coach or one of the assistants go, "Oh, we need that area down there now. We've decided to do this with a couple of extra players. Can you move your drills or set up your drills there?" So that can be pretty frustrating, but it is reality. So I always look at it and go, everything you do has got to be planned for the worst case scenario. So all I can say there is you just need to be prepared to make adjustments if need be to keep the continuity and the professionalism of the session there. If that has compromised a session or it's something that you would discuss with the coaches later, not there at that time with players and that around as well. You need to have a full plan on what equipment is required. I tend to bring a lot of my own cones and gear only because that way you've got full control of them. But we've all had times when you've let the managers know that you want 8 tackle bags or 10 strike shields or hit shields, and then you get there and find that 4 have been allocated somewhere else, which doesn't seem a big deal for those coaches. They just go, "Oh, we grabbed 4 of those bags," but it can make a huge issue to your training session and how your plan has been put forward and evolves. So if that's the case, it becomes there's a lot more standing around, less active time for all athletes, and the perceived lack of organisation, even though it's not your fault, looks like it's you. So having those backup plans to keep everything succinct, even though internally it might be frustrating for you, you've got to be able to suck it up, work really hard to set the drills up then with the area that you've now been reallocated and try and make it work. It's also important to get a clear number of how many players that you're going to have at your sessions. Whether if in a rugby type scenario or rugby league type scenario, are you going to have just first grade? Are you going to have all grades? I've turned up to Shoot Shield session in Sydney, my very first session with a team that was just going to be first grade and second grade, looking at 30 to 40 players in a pre-season for a team that was fairly low and had fairly low expectations on the ladder. They changed coaches. They had some good media out there. They had allocated me 2 fields to do the training session, which was fantastic. And there was just myself and the head coach there for the first training session. We had 250 players turn up with just me running it and his assistants. So all I can say is be prepared for all scenarios, because that can be really intimidating. At that stage, I was very experienced anyway, but that was still a fairly confronting session to try and line up when you had 250 players. It was a matter of sort of digging deep on experience and setting up really quickly to be able to cater for that, which is also an advantage, the fact that you turn up early and you're organised, so it gives you the chance to do that. So all of those things equate to what makes your session run professionally and what makes you look professional as a strength and conditioning coach. The sessions need to be set up to allow for optimal time utilisation. So when we're doing sessions in the gym, everything we have here is ready to go when we get here. Our high performance centres quite unique in the way that we don't have multiple teams using the centre at a time. We have one team at a time use the centre, so we know when they're coming in, exactly what time and how it's all going to work. So what it does do is allow us to have the gym set up completely before they walk into the centre. Some of the little things, we have the weights always aligned in sequence and colour-coded on the bars. We preload any stations and bars at warm-up levels if we have a clear understanding of the level of the athletes that are coming in. If we're doing incline presses, we have the benches up and inclined. If we're using battle ropes, they're set up. They're aligned out into the areas you want to work at. The same as if you're using hurdles, they're aligned and measured out onto the sled tracks. Med ball slams, anything with throwing of med balls or dead balls, we have those in set areas in the gym to optimise the stations they're at. Any mats down for ab work or any work on the floor. And if we're using the sled track for sled work, we make sure that that's isolated off, that the sleds and prowlers can be used where athletes and players aren't walking across. And we always make the athlete put weights away as they finish, because we try and build that culture that it's a high performance centre. You're here to get high performance and professional work. So in that, the idea is that you respect the centre, you put the gear away and you run like that. What's really interesting, even for us, I find that if you have the gym set up professionally, no matter what teams you get through, even at the higher level, you don't get the egos of those teams sort of thinking, well, I'm at this level, I can finish the training session and walk out. Because it's set up well for a start, we generally find that the coaches and S&C coaches will come in and meet with us first. They'll have a look at the gym, how it's set up, usually pretty impressed with how it is. And generally they'll say to us, is this exactly how you want it left at the finish? And we go, yes, we do. We go out and help them pack up as well. But we do let them take responsibility for doing that, because I think that's a really good way of building relationships and them building respect in what you've got to offer as well. As far as setting up the field and court, we like to ensure that everything you have is required and ready to go, exactly the same as the gyms, bags, cones, hit shields, balls, so you can start on time. So I'm really big on punctuality. If you get to the stage where you wait until key players arrive before you start the session, you're going to find that your session's going to start later and later and later. So I don't ever want to try and build that culture where people can think they can just drop in whenever they like. The session starts at the time it's supposed to start. And if those players turn up late, they then have to go with one of the other assistant S&Cs we had there, go through the same warm-up routine as everyone else, and then catch up into the program as we work through as well. Sometimes you'll get coaches decide to have a talk at the start of sessions. Sometimes that'll finish on time for you to start on time. Sometimes it cuts into your allocated time at the start of the session. So if they have a chat and it's something important about the game on the weekend or what's happening later in the week and it drifts past your start time, it's really important then just to check with the coaches that has that 5 minutes or 6 minutes come off your session, or are you still allowed to run the time that you had allocated, which is really, really important, because what you don't want, and there's nothing more unprofessional than coaches or managers coming up halfway through a drill saying, hey mate, you've got 2 minutes left, we need to keep the time rolling and be on time. So obviously there it's not really appropriate to sort of mention that it cut into your time at the start. That can be discussed later, but you need to get clarity around what impact that has for you. With it as well, the S&C coach should be able to set up to ensure that you can have a really nice sequential flow from drill to drill or exercise to exercise. It's important to get the players at the start of session prior to your start off time if possible, and explain what the session is and how it's going to work. They need to know what each station is going to be and what the expectations are for the drill and the session as a whole. They need to know what happens when the first drill is completed. So if you're working with a big block of players and you've got 4 or 5 drills set out and working simultaneously, how do the players, when their time's up on that drill, how do they get from one drill to the next one? Which drill do they go to? And how much time do they get before the next drill starts? Or once they get there, is it immediate? So they need to understand that right at the start, because trying to explain that with big numbers just doesn't work when you're rolling through as well. It just doesn't work. You've got to make sure that they're pretty conversant. And if you address that right at the start, you'll have some players that will actually get it, and they will lead those players that we all have that never seem to understand or know what's happening. You've got those leaders there that are going to roll through it. They need to know when they're going to get a drink. Is that going to be after you've done two grids? Are we going to have a stop for a drink at that point, or is it just a drink station where it's just a little small splash and dash as they walk past? So all of those things just help make it a lot more professional on where you're going. And what happens when the big one is when your whole S&C session is finished for the evening or the morning, what happens when that's completed, and how much time do the players have before they go to their coaches and the technical, the skills training begins, and which groups go where? Are forwards and backs together? Are first grade and second grade together? So as a professional at the end of your session, to be able to say to those athletes, this is where you go now, this is where you go, it just helps them feel comfortable in their environment and not feeling lost or unsure of what's going to happen. So that communication is really important. When you're planning and key considerations around the real world experiences, conceptualizing your approach to training. Again, like I said, a lot of these points are repetitive, but I think they're really important to understand for everyone involved. Firstly, you need to know what area you have to work with, as we mentioned before. If it's rugby, if you've got 1 field, 2 fields, if you've got a full field, 50%, or you're just working 22 and in goal, all that you need to know. And exactly the same with your netball, basketball, court sports, or any drills or training you're doing on the field. It's critical that you've looked at the area, you know what you've got available, because this is critical in determining the choice of drill that you're going to run. And the sequential flow. So given the space you have available, you need to be able to identify how to set up for optimal results. And as I'll explain a little bit later, I like to draw the sessions that I'm going to do on field and on court, which I have arrows there to give myself a plan on how I get from one station to the next with minimal effort, minimal time, and minimal disruption to other drills that are happening. Some drills, due to their nature, may need to be done in certain areas, like in-goal areas. If you've got contact drill that's going to chop the field a little bit more, I generally try and do those in the in-goal or in the dead ball areas. So those type of drills you need to set up first and plan around those if they're the drills that are not actually movable in your plan and need to be in that set place. And your setup can be influenced by the type of drill, so it's important that the drills have to be set up in the area based on where you're going to be able to train and where you get best results. They can be best workflow that suits the drills that you have. So I also like to have everything set up prior. It does show that you're organised and professional and have thought about your program and thought about how you're going to minimise player anxiety about where they're going to go and how they do things. So I would also like to reiterate that you need to have a backup plan. If you're on fields, on the Gold Coast here, we can have a nice, beautiful day and in half an hour get a thunderstorm. So some of the backup plans that you need to look at is always have it where if it rains, what areas on your field, if there's areas on your field that are a little bit more susceptible to getting wet than other areas, just make notes of what you might have to readjust before you get there to facilitate looking after the field and making sure you're not falling out with the groundsman by doing repetitive drills in areas that are a little bit more vulnerable. So again, like I said, in this conceptual approach to your planning, like you're obviously going to have your target characteristics, and part of this session is not to go through what these all are. This is more just an example, but your on-field conditioning for your field sports, you've got areas to look at where you might be looking at shuttles, you might be looking at repeat speed, interval training, high intensity workout. You might be looking at doing your Broncos or your 1.2K shuttles as a test or as a drill in itself. So each of those type of sessions will require different amounts of field and different amounts of and better places or better or more organised running drills if they're high speed running. So the key considerations for when you're setting up for these type of drills and that on court or on the field of you've got to have a clear understanding of the levels of the athletes that you have in your session. So if you've just got a first grade side where they're a higher level team that have been working together for many years and going things really well, that's important to be able to identify that. In reality, there's a lot of times where you might have first grade, second grade, third grade, plus a number of Colts teams. So when you start to get a diversity in the players, some of that needs to be set up around the capabilities of your players and how you structure those into the different types of drills so your more elite level players in your squad don't get compromised in their workout because they're working with athletes at a lower level. So I'm not saying you have to segregate the session apart, but it might be times when you need to put those better players in a drill and slowly mix them up. And there's some drills where you can do it where you can have them together where it's not an issue, but there's some not. But it's definitely a consideration you need to look at within those drills. You always need a really good structured warm-up, and it's good to have a few different warm-up routines to just keep the variety there. And if those warm-ups include a lot of the warm-up exercises that they're going to do pre-game as well, it's good there where you can incorporate those into your warm-up for field sessions so the players' form is correct, they know what they're looking at and how that's structured to work for them as well. What time's allocated to achieve the results you need in that session, and obviously the number of players. So like I said, your target characteristics there, when you look at that, you can be speed work, power work, endurance, hypertrophy, flexibility. All of those sessions are really, all of those characteristics are really important to include in your workout, and how you do them and when you do them. But that is included in how you set that field up or court up to achieve those results, depending on the type of year where you're in, type of year and the part of the season you're in. So the main thing is the plan has to be workable for the squad. And like I said, you can be in situations where you might have 20 players, you might have 250. Hopefully you're pre-warned on an idea of that number, but just be aware that you might have to make compromises and be ready. If you have to change or deviate your options, that may need to be required to be adjusted because more people have arrived than you thought. Well, then you need to do that. But you need to change the flow and adjust where the exercises would normally be to optimize space and to make sure you can accommodate those numbers that you've got. So I always look at it and think it's a little bit better to compromise the ideal scenario that you've planned out and the session to run smoothly and look organised than to try and stick with a pre-organised concept that now doesn't work because of the number of players that are arrived and for your session to look unorganised. So if you try and persevere with the original plan at larger numbers, that can cause an issue. The workout will become disjointed, look unorganised because of the flow, and impede the session outcomes that you're after. So don't be afraid to make those little adjustments if you need to get the results that you want to make your professional session look organised and really professional. So again, you've got to look at the target characteristics that are in your drills, what you're trying to achieve in the gym, strength, power, hypertrophy, with your field and court sessions. Are you looking at speed and power? Are you going to incorporate footwork into there? Are the coaches wanting to include some ball work into your drills as well, which is no dramas at all. It just needs to be spoken about at the start so everyone's aware of what's happening. What is the session length? And the program must be designed to fit in there. And the start and finish times must be clearly defined and communicated all the time. So the players and coaches must be aware of those timings and everyone aware of what you're going to do and how you're going to stick to it. And it's really important as well to make sure you finish on time. Gym sessions for our high performance centre here, we have back-to-back teams coming in and we have a cleaning routine that's obviously been upgraded lots more since all the issues with COVID, and it's probably routine that we'll stick with forever now, but can take 20 minutes in between sessions to do a really good job to clean everything down so everything's back to square for the next team that's coming in. So any compromise in your finish time compromises your cleaning time or compromises the start time for the next team. So we're pretty fanatical about making sure those end times and start times are stuck to. And regardless of what type of drill you're doing, like I said, whether you're doing MAS or running Broncos or doing full field sprints, you just need to determine your field requirements and ensure that you've got that and the area needed is available and at a level or the surface is good enough to be able to run the drills you want. And also, you need to quantify your times for your drills. Time per rep, time per set of drills, and total time. So you've also got to factor in whatever you're doing in those drills for time, that rest time or changeover time in between needs to be added to your session. Otherwise, that slowly gets compromised and gets further out of sync to where you're starting to catch up and get those sessions rushed through and drills get compromised because you've run out of time. So just important, like I said, organisation is the key to that all the time. So for me, I like to say draw and explore. We've got a couple of examples there. This is how I do it now. There's no right and wrong. I've got a mate that just does everything out on Excel, which is fine. The important point to understand is you need to understand it. So whether it's a field session or a court session, the field session on the gym session on the right, there's a bit of a layout roughly of how stations are set up in the high performance centre here. So this is just one that I designed out for a 40-player circuit that we did for a rugby team that was coming in. We left some extra space there for 10 extra sessions just in case, and also some area that wasn't set up that we could put players in if need be. And in that session in question there, we actually had 8 extra players turn up. So instead of being caught out and trying to find drills and look like you're grasping at straws to throw drills in and squash drills back up, we already had the plan that was ready to go. So it was just a matter of incorporating those new drills into that routine, and everything had a flow. And as you can see, I just put arrow to arrow on where they go in the gym. So if at any stage players get lost or you lose your train of thought yourself, you can quickly look at that and reference it. Now, I've got over 30 years experience doing that, and I still do this out for every session that I run, and I keep every one of those sessions for future reference as well, and I make notes on them. If some of the sessions worked well, which drills didn't work well. On the left is just a field session there. I always use the lines on the fields or on the court to align my drills. I don't set them up on the lines to fall out with the people marking the fields all the time, but I'm pretty fanatical about drills being square and aligned. I hate looking down a line of cones and seeing a big S-bend in the middle. So that's just a personal preference of mine, but I do think that it does establish credibility and professionalism around how you set your drill up and how it works. And the drills are aligned, again, to allow minimal player movement across the drills, and that subsequently allows a better timing, allows it to work easier. And if you have numerous grids running simultaneously, it's really important that that player flow is working in a set fashion, whether it be clockwise, anti-clockwise, or left to right, but everyone knows where they're going. So it's just well done, and everyone's got an idea of how they're going to work and how they're going to get there. On conceptual approaches to training as well, like I said, the visual approach always works to me by having it done out and looking how it works. We have a lot of students doing prac hours or internships with us, and they soon work out my drawings and how to help set up drills and that as well. So like I said, they don't have to do that. How you want to do that is completely up to you and your style. You might not want to do it at all, that's fine, but mainly for me, all I'm saying is that you need to have some sort of reference point that you can go to make sure everything's running exactly how it should be. And again, things like the video that's there on screen now, the tackle bags are on the dead ball line, so the tackle and hits are happening over the line, which keeps the groundsman happy. There's also a couple of hit shells coming up there now that are set up there for the next drill that don't interfere with this one, but allows you to be pre-organised and ready to go. And like I said, for me, that's 30 years experience in doing those sort of drills and setting up, but I still like to have that there so we've got a plan in place to work with. Draw it out, see what it looks like, run through it yourself and go from there. I've had one drill for many years that I've designed out on paper that looks fantastic and for all intensive purposes should work fine. But I have never had a team that I've worked with where it's ever worked to my satisfaction. And after a number of years, I've put it away because I realised it's not just the team that it's working with or the level of athlete I'm working with. It looks right, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't flow. So it's important at times to make those notes so you can put that away, have that in the box there ready to make adjustments and try and get it to work, or just put it away and shelve it and never use it again. But be organised with how you do it. To have that sequential flow where you're training numerous teams, we have times at Bond where we have our women's team, 3 grades of men's, 2 grades of culture training together. So as in the backdrop to this slide, I get all the players together at the start, all just stand around. We have a chat about what the drills are going to be, what the plan is. Yes, we're going to do 20 minutes only, or we're going to do 30 minutes. So I like to stick on those times so players Don't get caught out where you tell them they're going to do 20 minutes and then add another 10 in. From my personal point of view, I think that just trains athletes to always keep something in reserve, just in case you add something in. I like them to understand if they do this 10 minutes or that 20 minutes or whatever the allocated time is, that when they get to that and put in the full effort, the drill's over. So it teaches them to work with you and get the results they're after. Like I said, for that structure, we just want a warm-up done prior to any session in the gym or on the field. That's not negotiable. Players running late have to be able to get through and do those properly. We have to explain the session goals, and the coaches need to understand that, and the strength and conditioning coaches. And we need to ensure the players know the timing of the drills, the changeover routines, drill explanations, well marked, optimising times, and backup drills if need be. Again, the stations are well marked. Like I said, if you're working in the drills, the setup and the communication, we had the little photo on the left there when we had COVID, and the COVID was coming back into where we could bring small numbers in together. We had our gym floor marked out with coaching boxes, which were exclusion zones for coaching. We had arrows on the floor where groups of 6 players would train, and then they'd move on before the next 2 come in. And we had players entering through one door, exiting through the other, then a clean of the whole centre before the next drill. So even though our rules in Queensland had relaxed a little bit there, we made sure that even with something like rugby, our 6 teams completely trained individually and separated all the time in case we had an issue with a reinfection of COVID or a player getting caught out, which might affect the team. It was only going to directly affect one team. So with the gyms and the field sessions, we actively tried to ensure that ticked the box as far as keeping the maximal number of players available for selections and that as well. Some of the other things that you can look at doing with your teams, which a lot of people do anyway, is you might look in the gym, especially with netball. You might work your attack and your attack in one group, mid-courts, defence in one group. The same as with rugby, you might have your tight 5, loose forwards, inside, outside backs working in groups. This can have a profound effect on how you go through your timing and get through your sessions, mainly because a lot of times, without pigeonholing too much, a lot of those athletes will be training similar weights. With rugby, they'll be similar type of builds, so there's less adjustments in rack heights and adjustments for benches and that, and probably less adjustments for the amount of weights that are going to be used because they're going to be at similar levels. So that's just a little thing that you can just do that will also keep the session more efficient. And again, like I said, we always make sure that we have the athletes well and truly look after the centre. They re-rack and put their own weights away and make sure that they understand that it's a high-performance centre. Whatever level they're at, we keep our standards high and the professionalism there. So, and like I said, in situations like the gym or on the field, you'll ultimately get times when you'll get athletes that will arrive that cannot do an exercise for a reason, through injury. They might be impeded by range of movement or never done that exercise before. So it's always good, again, to have those alternate exercises and alternate areas in the gym where you can put those players and give them stuff to do without it looking like it's been an inconvenience for them to come in and try and work out a routine. You're always accommodating and try and make them feel welcome and a part of the program, no matter what you do all the time. So, like I said, this is just quickly going over it a little bit as well. Like your equipment required, repetitive drills off the main surface, utilise your field work and field and court markings where possible, and always understand how much area you've got available. If you've got to deviate off that plan for larger numbers, you've just got to make sure you communicate that. It's better to compromise a little, like I said before, at the start than to try and make ad hoc changes on the move. And like I said, if you try and persevere with that original plan, that's not going to work. You're the one that just looks like you're unorganised. So important to make sure that you're always on top of things and looking in control, even though you might be struggling a little bit mentally to try and keep up with it and making adjustments there. You've got to look in control of the situation because the players are looking to you as a professional to make sure that happens. So with our workout plan in the High Performance Centre, it can cater up to 60 players in the high performance gym. So other things that need to happen is what happens if there's extras or injured players. Like I said, there's other areas to use. So we have 25 metre pool, we have recovery pools, altitude chamber and cardio theatre. So these are all areas that you can look to optimise and add into your routines to make sure you cover everyone and go through that everyone's getting the attention they need without compromising your numbers in the gym and be able to utilise those areas for the different scenarios that arise. Like I said, to optimise the location and position and allocation of areas, planning and well structured, keep it compact and confined. Don't take more room than you need on the field because this might allow coaches to start setting up prior, which always is good for them. It's not all just about you. So we've got to make sure that we work in with everyone because we're trying to achieve the same results. I also get, if we have interns or students helping us out as well, if we're working with sessions where we've actually finished with one of the grids as we're working with cones or tackle bags, we just get the interns just to throw those off the side of the field. They don't have to stack them away at that stage, but just so they're off the field so your coaches and other staff and managers know that that area is now available and they can start setting that up area. So it just also means that by the time you finish your session, a lot of the gear's off the field. The other squads can move, the other coaches that can move straight onto your field, start working while you pack your gear away, and it just optimises time as you're going as well. I'm aware of the time, how we're going at the moment, so just rush through a few of these little ones as well. So we've got on-field court conditioning type sessions. So, we've got a traditional type of court sessions. We've got game-based conditioning. In game-based conditioning drills, is there going to be coach input into those drills? Is there going to be a ball thrown in there? So all fine to work with your coaches in that, but you still got to understand that the session is your session. So I don't mind the coaches and actively encourage the coaches to help with sessions as far as when you're doing tackle drills and that to have input on technique if need be. But I like them to do that on the fly, not stop the session to go through and talk about how things work. Do it on the fly. If they're going to do a full coaching session or a technical session on technique later, they can run that session how they like. But the crux of it is the session's been designed for what you want. So coaching on the fly is good. Stopping your session is not. Like I said, in this situation here, you've got teams or squads that are working with, that's just the netball side doing an outdoor session there. Like I said, the key considerations there, you obviously got a full field for that type of drill. So, is it going to be circuit conditioning? Is it going to be repeat sprint ability? Are you going to work with short intervals, medium intervals, long intervals, max aerobic speed, or a bronco test? Duration, like I've just got those times there to give you an idea, but you need to know, like, is it going to be 4 minutes or is it going to be 8 minutes? Is it going to be longer than 10 minutes? And what work-rest ratio? It's going to be determined by the target characteristics of your program or your target characteristics as a session that day, but they're all factors that need to be in your routine and in your thoughts when you're planning and designing these sessions to get the optimal results. Also, classifications, small-sided games, medium-side, large-side games. What do they mean? What are the sizes? So when you're doing those, you already need to have planned out how many players you're going to have in those drills. Are they going to be 5 versus 5, 9 versus 9? Are you going to try and get a team into some of those drills? Are players going to drop off at certain points in those drills to make it a little bit harder, and the workload goes up. So everything like that needs to be in your plan and structured to make it work. And your pitch or field size, what are you looking at? Like a small-sided games, 10 metres to 40 metres, medium size 20 to 40, long-sided games 40 to 70. Again, that can be up to you on how you design those, but just have a clear interpretation of what those games and the size of those grids are going to look like before you do it. And again, also the duration of how those grids are going to fit in with what you're doing as well. So game-based conditioning and the practical application. So decreasing players in the game-based drills results in greater time motion demands and increased physiological and perceptual responses. So the nut and shell of that is that as you drop players off and you've got less players in the drill, the players in there are going to work harder. So you need to understand that, obviously, as you're going through. That's not rocket science, but again, that needs to be a part of your planning. Rugby-specific small-sided games, say, might require relatively fewer sprint efforts, especially when involving greater numbers of players, and if you've conducted it in a really small area. So some of those things you need to get to make sure that you, get the sprint runs or the high-speed running as well that you need, that you may be expecting you get in some of those drills. You might have to supplement that by adding some supplementary drills as part of that small-sided games, because depending on the player's skill level, your sprint work or your high speed work in some of the small-sided games might not be at the level you want, because the skills and the ball handling skills of your players are not at a level to allow them to be sprinting hard and still getting the ball through the hands efficiently how you want. So if you've got lower skill players that whole ball through the hands type skill is slow, well then the chances are that you're running with those drills, even if you want higher level speeds, are going to be slower. So you might have to supplement something in or add into that drill some stuff on the side. So sometimes between those drills, we'll add some intermittent wrestling type drills that may decrease the running demands a little bit, but will increase the repeated high sprint efforts of the small-sided games, so the players still get a solid workout, even though they might have been struggling a little bit with the skill level of the drill. So then we move on to like non-traditional and unconventional type of conditioning. Steve Bird and I Steve's with the IUSCA, and Steve Bird and I back in the late 80s were doing all of these things now that sometimes are looked on to be new, but with tyres and sledgehammers and slosh pipes, like stuff like junkyard training, strongman, wrestling. So we had battle ropes out there, which at that stage were just Navy ropes that they used to tow boats in. Truck tyres or mining equipment tyres, slosh pipes, sandbags, sledgehammers, kegs, all to make it a classification where we got a high intensity interval training session out of it. It's all different. It's good to mix your training up and try all those sort of things as well. But some of the considerations you've got to look at there is stuff like your wrestling drills. Putting them in can mix it up and make it really fun for the players. And what you generally find is in those sort of scenarios, then a couple of really basic ones that are just there, it brings out the competitiveness in the players. So sometimes when you've done drills, they're a little bit tired, they might be a bit demotivated. To be able to pair the players up and do these type of drills just brings that competitive nature out, and you tend to get that next little bit of effort that you probably wouldn't have got with just a running drill. In this type of situation here, you might want to look at how you pair the players up, whether it be positions, by strength levels, by size. Again, nothing's right or wrong. It's just different options that you can use in there as well. The guy on the left there at the moment's an MMA fighter, so we don't normally get them to choke their players out at the end of those wrestling drills. That was just a little bit of fun at the end there. And generally this type of drill, again, going back to the field, we do that in the dead ball areas or in goal areas where it's going to chop the field up less to keep him happy with the groundsman. Because I don't know what it's like in the UK, but over here the groundsman and the management of the fields can get pretty pedantic on their field because they want it pristine at all time, whereas the coaches want to train on it all the time. So there's compromises there. So everything that you can do, especially if you're having televised games, anything you can do to help the field remain good and train in areas that are less visible on camera or create the least amount of hassle is well and truly welcomed by the groundsman. Next one, in Australia, or we have a term here we just call bulletproofing. So bulletproofing we do with our teams, which adds in a little bit of stretching and core targeted work to build resilience in our athletes. They can include, they don't have to, but they can include, my wife is running that session there, which she does for a lot of the elite teams that come through here as well. And it can include yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, different types of routines that are adapted for sport specificity. So in season, we use these type of sessions at the end of the session, and it incorporates into a nice stretch down at the end. It brings the players together at the end, and at times it's not a bad time where you can, while the instructor's not actually talking, to be able to walk around, chat to the players, have a good discussion with them, like good time for feedback, how well they went in the session, really proud of how they're going, like all that sort of positive feedback can be here while they're in a state of just relaxing down and winding down after the session. So during the season, or we do those at the end, pre-season and off-season, we sometimes will bring these in as a session or a block, as a grid in between numbers of other running sessions or ball skill sessions. And we also sometimes do that like a class where we might bring that in and do a 30 or 40 minute session purely just of this type of work as well. So sometimes with the rugby players, that was a little bit challenging to bring in to start with, but once they start to understand that everything's got to be activated and switched on to get the best, it's not just a matter of training heavy in the gym, like all of this is paramount to getting the optimum results as well. So like education is a big part of how it all works. So like I said, it's unique, exciting and unorthodox training methods that you can incorporate into your plan to make it a little bit different. The S&C coaches just need to be aware sometimes of the high metabolic, biomechanical and neuromuscular stresses of some of the different routines and that you put in there. There's not saying they're right or wrong, just saying that you need to be aware of how hard some of the drills can be. It's great to try these initiatives to mix training up and give it a go. And if you've got good relationships with the players, there'll be stuff that you'll try that won't work, and that's fine. It's not an indictment on what you're doing. It's just a matter of being available there to try new things and see what works. I always like to, like I said, on the papers and that I take to the training sessions, I like to keep notes on what works, what didn't work, what wasn't so good and why it mightn't work and how I could make adjustments. So that's really important as well. And with these type of junkyard and strongman type trainings, it is important to understand that the limitations a little bit are to try and work out the exact nature of the overload you're getting, because the individual athlete responses are different. Once you've been with players and doing tackling type, wrestling type drills, there's a lot of different ways to cheat and make it easier, and you look around and players aren't having a go. So it's always good to keep that in front of you. But like I said, it's more the benefits of it. Once you get your players bought into that, they seem to adapt to it and enjoy it as well. So all of those little extras are really good to do as well. All I would say is that with those strongman and junkyard type sessions where you've got tyres, big ropes, tyres from the mines, kegs you might use, and that sort of stuff. Before you organise all those, it's a really good idea to check with the club that they've got places to store those, or there's places where you can put those out of the way that they're happy with and easy to access, because it can be problematic if you're trying to store that gear and you haven't asked the club and then they're stuck with it. So just do the right thing there to make sure everything's above board and ready to go, and explain why you want it and get started and have a crack with it. Communication and reporting, like I said, get the players together, make that communication open and constructive and concise to your players prior to the sessions. The flow is optimised in players and coaches that are fully informed of what is happening. So the more they understand and know, the better they're going to be with working through the session. And the communication through the workouts and at the end is two-way communication. It's always good to ask the players, how was that session? How do you feel? Ask the coaches, were they happy with that? Were they happy with the structure? It's good to get feedback there. And with your communication to the coaches, it's important to provide information in a format that they can understand. It is important that they get the info they want, but in an understandable way. So with a lot of kids, when they come out of uni, they'll do up the most fantastic reports with all the bells and whistles and that many graphs that, even experienced S&C coaches are struggling to work out what they're trying to get out of it. So just remember, it can be as simple as it needs to be able to communicate what you need to communicate to the coaches, and they'll appreciate that. And if they want more, they'll ask for that. So I always make sure that feedback's out there, and after each session as well, we do it, during the season and off season at the different blocks and discuss it. And we have regular meetings weekly with our coaches. But I always do out a strength and conditioning report at the end of the year to go through what we've achieved, what I think we could do better ourselves, whether it be I needed more time, could we do it this way? Is the session better structured into their workout that way? How do they feel about that? But if you've got those relationships there where it's really constructive, it's really good to be able to do that and get that involvement there to make next year's session better, because the aim is to work through and get every year better than the one previously. And as coaches, we just keep on learning. So to wrap it all up at the end, just on a quick recap, planning and key considerations: conceptualise your approaches to planning, sequential flow from drill to drill, set up your field or gym prior to being there and be organised. Decide on the type of drills that you're doing, whether they're intervals, traditional, game-based, non-traditional type exercises or routines. And with that communication, keep it open and constructive and format that coaches want and can understand. So, like I said, just a couple of photos there. Just graphs. That's just really simple Excel type graph that I do. What's on it there is not important, but there's not too many bells and whistles. It just gives some targets, what we're doing, some targets that Queensland Rugby had in their sevens to do, and where we were sitting prior to those, and discussion on what the teams were doing compared to their rep teams and how that interrelated with our program as well. So all of that sort of stuff, you just got to make sure it's all there. I keep a lot of info and don't use a lot of it, but I'm sure if coaches come to me and go, it would have been good if we had that, I probably already have it somewhere, and it's just a matter of finding it. So, but like I said, the main thing all up, I'll open it up at the moment to see if anyone has any questions. That's the end of the formal part of my presentation, and I just wanted to say before, if anyone has any questions, but really big thank you to the IUSCA for getting involved strongly in this S&C space, because I appreciate that everyone's out there trying to do the best they can. We've got to try and make our industry the most professional it can be. And like I said, today was pretty dry, but I hope it ticks some boxes for people, because what you set up and how you set it up has a big impact on what we look like as strength and conditioning coaches and what we look like as an industry. And I hope you get some takeaways out of that to make sure that you get the results that you want, and your team and players that you're working with can see the effort and the time you put into your programs to make you a really valuable asset to the organisation, which we know we are, as far as being able to keep players out there on the field and getting the best results out of them. But sometimes we're an industry that needs to just be able to take that to the next step. And all of these little things that you can do to make that better are well and truly well worth doing to get the results you're after. And the other thing is, if anyone's got any questions, that if you get out here to Australia and come to the Gold Coast to have a look around, make sure you give me a buzz and catch up. Only too happy to take people through the centre we've got here, show you what we've got, and sit and talk about S&C, because we've got to look at it that we're all in this together, and the more we can develop each other and pick up from each other, the better the results all up. So I just really want to thank everyone for being involved this morning, and if anyone has any questions, hopefully I'll be able to work out how to answer those via the setup, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Glenn, for that. Really appreciate it. The presentation was fantastic, and there's some great depth in there as well, and I'm sure everyone's enjoyed it. I don't know if you can see it on the left-hand side of the screen. There's a little chat icon, and on there, that's where the questions will get dropped in.
Okay.
So if you just hit that little chat icon, it should bring up Alan's question.
Yeah, okay, no worries at all. Yep. Oh, that's an interesting question. Have you ever considered working in pro sport, or do you enjoy the university environment? I'd have to say both. The pro, I don't know what it's like in other countries, Alan. Like some of the things that I find in pro sport over here, especially in Olympic sports, it can be reasonably fickle in those industries. They work on that 4-year cycle, and some of the Academy of Sports over here with the Olympics that have just finished have gone through a full cut on their S&C staff and coaches, and it's sort of like clean out the closet and start again with new ideas and bring different people in. So I suppose I've worked in those environments where I've gone and done sessions and inputted and consulted into those, which is a really enjoyable experience. It's the security around that's a little bit more of a worry. And if you're nice and young and you're prepared to jump in and do 4 years there, one of the things in those environments is that there tends to be a bit of a cycle where if you're in one sport and when that cycle finishes, you might get the opportunity in another if you've got the relationships there. I got into the university system a little bit by default. I had my own gym 30 years ago and decided to do a bit of a sea change and move to Sydney, and got put on running a huge program at Macquarie University, which was 7,000 members in a gym. It was huge indoor-outdoor pools. They had professional teams and sports there, their own campus, like a great way to start in the university environment. And that's how I got started and really enjoy that. And that run was running gyms as well as aerobic classes, as well as their sports programs. I got offered the position here at Bond University, which was a really exciting one, which absolutely enjoy, where they'd bought a high performance centre that was set up by a professional rugby league club that had to sell the centre, and the university bought it. So I come in with a clean slate. It was a building. It was the high performance centre was set up. They had all the gym equipment and weights, pool, altitude range, a chamber and everything, and no one had got into using it at all at that stage. So it was great to come in and set it up for a start. And now it's a really nice environment where we're working with the teams and squads we want to. We've built that profile a little bit now where when teams come to the Gold Coast, we're sort of the first point of call to see if they can come and use the centre. So it keeps those interactions with all those other professional teams there. And like I said, it's quite a unique experience to actually watch all of these other teams come in and train, where you can see what they're doing, see how they interact, which you don't normally get that opportunity. You only get that with the team you worked in and the sport you're working in. So that's pretty unique. But and the good part with the university too, when you get a bit older, you sort of lose the ego of working with high performance stuff all the time, to be able to help develop young students doing sport and exercise science, whether it's in a degree or masters, make that step into training and coaching sports and having more professional staff and higher qualified staff coming through strength and conditioning is also an extremely positive thing in your life to be able to do. It feels like you're really giving back to the industry. So that'd be my answer there.
Do we have any other questions?
International interns. Quite interesting, that one. We haven't at this stage. We predominantly have interns come in from universities around Australia. Because we're a university, a lot of the times we get asked to take university students because a lot of them are a little bit higher level, and because our staff here are pretty highly qualified, we can take students and that are at a pretty high level. So that's limited space in Australia, so we tend to do that. Haven't been asked for international students, but it's not sort of that public yet, but we're going to be doing some arrangements with universities in the UK, which will be about exchanges in strength and conditioning coaches, in our teaching program, and in our athletes, in our high performance tier 1 sport exchanges as well. So I would say that international interns, because of that relationship into the UK, will probably come within the next 12 months. We've just got a $45 million new building and gate labs and more testing labs, doubling the size of the area of the building we're in here now, right next door, which will all be joined by sky bridges. So we're going to be getting a lot more professional teams that want to do more stuff in around the testing space, and international internships would be something that we definitely look at there, particularly with universities we've aligned with. For Ronald, have I ever worked with cricket? Limited. I played cricket as a sort of a medium fast bowler and number 3 batsman, so a little bit of experience playing it. Funnily enough, we have Sheffield Shield over here, and we've got 5 players coming up next week from the Tasmanian Tigers Sheffield Shield side, coming up to play some tournaments in Queensland that are coming here to use the facility next week. And I think I did either my level 2 or level 3 ASCA with a guy that was the head of S&C for New Zealand cricket many years ago. So yeah, so I'd be lying if I said I directly worked with cricket, but again, like I said, it's another sport where if you get cricketers that come in to work with you, it's just a matter of doing your research there on what you need to do and what needs to happen as an S&C coach around injury areas or sites that are the most important for them, whether they be batting or bowling, and work from there.
Any more? If not, again, I'm very conscious of time as well. I'd like to, Glenn, I'd like to thank you for a fantastic presentation and taking the time out at a very early time in the morning. Hopefully the sun shines up for you right now. But yeah, no, thanks again for taking your time. For those of you who are members of the IUSCA, Glenn's presentation will be available for you to rewatch. That'll be up within the next few days upon the IUSCA membership page. But thanks again, Glenn, and I'm sure I'll speak to you soon.
No worries at all, mate. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. See you later, everyone.
Thank you. See you, mate. Bye.